You guys can watch my back for those annoying horny bears. I don't think I smell like a horny bear, so I should be okay, but you never know. What do we got? I gotta get some hay here pretty quick and get home. The bugs aren't too bad. For all you wondering where the word Sabe came from, I think it was possibly, I don't know if it was directly given to the First Nations people from them or not, but that is the original, more common name used for these beings. And it wasn't Bigfoot or Sasquatch. All right. So that's why I use it myself. And obviously it's up to you what you want to refer to these beings as, but for me, it's just another possible notch to get a little more advanced in the topic, right? If everybody get a little more realistic about it. Anyway, babbling. Here we go. What do we got? Steve, been a member of the round table since day one. Oh, good for you. I've often wanted to email my experience, but knew I'd have to revisit that night. Feel as though I've always been able to bury experiences in my life. Yeah, I think a lot of people, many of us do that. Many of us do that. Then as you get older, you understand that you have to deal with your shit. Otherwise, you're packing shit. And also, if you don't deal with your shit, then people that come into our lives and we have relationships with, then they have to deal with your shit and our shit, right? So, good for you for coming forward and emailing, but I thought I'd pass it on to many people out there who don't deal with their shit. They stick their head in the hole like an ostrich and don't deal with it, and then it just festers and festers and festers, and then people that come into your life, they have to take on your shit. Babbling. What's up with me babbling today? As I've had similar childhood as you, divorced parents and everything that went with it, it strikes me every time people said they had the experience, maybe with a friend, and haven't talked about the experience since. I realized from my experience that for my own sanity, I had to bury it deep. I've had a tremendous amount of time to process the experience, and the fear was what struck me to the core, Steve. I guess the reason that struck me is I've never feared anything. I've been a heavy bridge and highway worker for years, and you have to have a screw loose for a lot of shit we did nightly. Oh, no doubt. I was working on Highway 84 between New York and Connecticut 5 years ago. It was a hot summer night. My foreman came to me and asked me to go check our cone formation, make sure everything was still standing, as cones sometimes get taken down. Being an older senior guy, that was great. I got a few minutes to relax as another worker drove me back a mile to the middle of the cone formation. From there I'd walk, having one earphone in. I was listening to some tunes, having a quick smoke as I walked down a breakdown lane. This highway was not lit, so it could be extremely dark, but I was chilling, enjoying the downtime, walking about another half mile. I was enjoying a slight breeze, hoofing down the highway when I felt the vibration of big footsteps. Holy shit. Looked behind me, saw nothing. I was now walking down a deserted, dark highway. I was now walking down a deserted, dark highway. No cars or trucks, but I still felt the vibration of footfalls on the ground. It seemed pretty big. Steve, as I turned around to look into the thick woods on the side of the highway, I could barely make out a figure. What the hell was it? It was at that moment that the fear in me took over. Legs tightening, and I was starting to have problems moving forward. I looked ahead, no oncoming traffic. What the F? I was barely able to continue walking forward, but with my eyes on the woods, still feeling bipedal steps as I literally had to force the steps. I was now walking out into oncoming traffic just to escape the side of the road. I had another quarter mile to walk to fallen cones, but was now looking for traffic, any cars, trucks, just to make myself feel better. I had never experienced fear like this before. I almost chuckled at myself as to why I was afraid of something I could barely see. Finally, traffic approached. I was still walking in one of the blocked lanes. People driving had to be wondering why I was walking so close to the traffic, but I felt safer close to oncoming vehicles. I tried to push forward the last 500 feet, head on a swivel between traffic and the wooded side of the highway. No sooner did I reach the last down cone when one of my crew pulled up to give me a ride back. Truly a godsend, as I was ready to call for a lift. By the time we got back to the section highway we were repairing, that event was buried so deep that I never thought to mention it to anybody. Steve, what struck me was the fear. I was making a living jackhammering with my back 6 to 12 inches from traffic, yet that wasn't close to the fear I experienced that night. I buried that shit so deep. That wasn't until I retired, started watching your channel, that I allowed myself to unlock that experience again. I know this sounds weird, but I felt like I had to mentally unlock the file in my head to even revisit the event. Perhaps that's what happens to people who witness these Sabe beings together. The friendship with the story gets buried. There's only a couple more weeks till fibromyalgia and migraines would retire me. Yeah, I got tinnitus in both ears too. Now that sucks, man. Sorry to hear that. Like I told my doc, I've learned to live with it. It only lets me hear what I need to hear. Steve, you have truly done a service to the many people in this club in a return. So many pieces of my puzzle have been filled in. Truly sorry for your loss of Mr. Macaroni. Always enjoyed watching him at your side. You will meet again. And when you make your move to straighten the evil in our world out, let me know. Retirement's boring. P.S. If you ever need a hand with all this, let me know, brother. Your brother from another, Theo Anastasio. Theo, I'm super glad that you unlocked that shit out of the file and spit it out and got it out of there. It was riding for free, rent free in your head, right? It's the fear, man. So that is it. I think it's safe to say, wouldn't you, round table, that it's the fear. The fear. I think we've had enough people from around the world describe the fear very clearly. And the fear is the number one factor of confusion of what to do when it comes to this topic, is it not? How many police officers have we heard from that have been gunned down, busted into dark crack houses? How many military people have we heard from that have gone into war, been blown up, seen their bodies shot and killed? And they all describe the fear of these things project into you as is absolutely substantially heavier than that of combat. Isn't that amazing? And that's something not to envy. I've had fear, I've had the terror of wanting to run, and that's a lot for me. I've never really experienced fear of wanting to run from anything until a few of these episodes that I've had. But I don't think I've had the true soul-crushing fear that a lot of you people have shared with us via your experiences in the emails here. But one thing for sure is every single one of you has got it across quite clearly. You put us there easily. But anyway, man, thanks for sending that in again, all right? And if you ever you need something from us, or you got more to share, you make sure you get a hold of me or somebody here and get it across, all right? And good luck to you. Forest female with 3 children. If you're interested. About a year ago, I had an encounter with forest female and the 3 children with her. The closest we got to each other was about 10 to 12 feet away. I could have walked up and touched her and the children, but I became hesitant to go nearer as the female was very tall and the 2 boys and 1 girl were very muscular for small children. They all wore uniforms. Uniform colors were green and brown. They wore a wide belt with a glowing light in the buckle of the belt. I would estimate the female to be 8 feet or greater. Her head came up to the first branches of the tree. The children looked somewhat like human children, but with these exceptions. There did not appear to be any joints, like elbows, knees. There was ligament in place of the joints. Also, the body ligament was dense and thick. When the children ran to and from the female, some of them turned their limbs up and down, causing me to see how the ligament works. Amazing how they could bend their arms and legs in any shape. There's much more details to be explained, but I don't know if you're interested in hearing the above. Gary Godfrey. Well, Gary, I'm pretty sure if you've been following this channel, you are going to be the very first person ever to have sent in something of that description, right? Obviously, it's going to raise some eyebrows of many, especially a uniform with a glowing belt buckle. I wasn't there. I don't know you. I am definitely not the person to say whether or not that's what you saw. If you are somebody who thinks it's fun, or maybe if you are somebody who oddly gets some kind of weird kick from making something up and sending it in, all right, well, you did it and I read it. Now what? Right? So, I don't, admittedly though, it will ring a bell once. I read a book. I'm sorry, I forget whose book it was, but I remember it was a partner of the author, a scientist, and I recall the quote that scientist said was, "I saw the thing and it had a blue belt on, and believe me, I wish I never seen it." It was the quote from that scientist to his friend who was the author of the book. I just can't remember who it was, but that's the only thing that does come to my mind when I read this email. But hey, man, you got more, you send it in, all right? If you're gonna, for all of you, especially the people who email me in, this is a test. When I read an email that says this is a test, is this the right email? You may have just used up your chance to get your email read out, all right? Because I rarely have time to reply to emails, rarely. There's a lineup 16 miles long of people who really need to be heard, and they send their emails in, and I feel like I can't get to enough of them by the minute. It drives me insane because I want to get to every single one. So if I see that test, the odd time I'll reply, but usually it's just like, all right, next, right? Please don't email me and say this is a test. Type in clearly my email address and hit send, and send your story with it, all right? It might be the only time it gets read. Blood curdling scream, another one. Here we go. Hi, Steve. Enjoy listening to your hunt stories and your sharing others' experiences. In 1985, our family was traveling with another couple to their toddler and their toddler son to British Columbia for a convention. We had seen Mount Shasta at a distance and pulled over in an open area to rest for the night. We've been taking turns driving the mobile traveler. We needed to get supper going, so everything went well until the wee hours of the morning. When what awoke me was a blood-curdling scream. It sounded like a woman. It was high-pitched but lasted too long with a lot of power and volume. I sat up quickly, so scared. To my surprise, no one else had stirred. It was only one scream, but one was enough. I pulled the covers over my head, so frightened, and somehow managed to fall back asleep. I mentioned it to my husband and the other couple the next morning as we were making breakfast. My friend's husband said, "I heard something," but kept his head down and didn't want to talk about it. When we were starting on the road again, we passed by a clearing where stood a small store, but more importantly, a huge statue of a Sasquatch in the center of the opening. We were wanting to cover a certain amount of traveling throughout the day, so we didn't turn around to go see what it was all about. Plus, maneuvering a big mobile traveler didn't allow for quick movements. It's something I'll never forget. Eerily familiar, hearing of others hearing similar screams. I wasn't about to look out the window nor go outside to check. Thanks for letting me share my experience. Requesting you use only my first name. Thanks again, Steve. Dorothy. Dorothy, absolutely appreciate what you sent in. The blood-curdling scream. You know how many people have reported that now from all over the world. And then that just reminds me, guys, on a quick note, Dorothy, I absolutely appreciate the time you took to email that in to us, okay? And if you come across anything in the future you think you can help everybody at the Round Table of Knowledge, make sure you send it in or encourage somebody to send in what they have, all right? Now, getting back to what I was going to share with you guys, I keep forgetting. So, probably only about, 300 yards behind where I currently live, there's been numerous Sasquatch sightings. It's just all there is to it. There's a native community right there, and was it 2 summers ago now, a logging truck driver is coming down the hill where the train tracks cross in the back, 40, and Sasquatch went across the road right in front of his truck. And I believe it's the same week or 2 weeks later, a male Sasquatch came up from the Birkenhead River and walked right across the paved road heading west, blatantly in front of adults and children, and he had fish in his hands. What else can I tell you about that? Another friend of mine used to live on the other side of the Birkenhead River, came home to a black bear in his garage at nighttime, ended up shooting it, went down a steep bank, wedged in the high side of the fir tree, and all he said to me was something picked it up and took it away. It's endless around there. But what I'm getting at right now is currently right behind where I live, somebody reported in our community that there's Sasquatch throwing rocks at people there 2 weeks ago. What are we right now, June 7th or something? And what else? Probably 3 weeks ago, which puts us into late May, at about 1:30 in the morning, I heard a rifle shot crack from the native community in the middle of the night. And it's not the first time. Randomly, I will hear gunshots coming from that community right in the back 40. And then other nights, I'll hear dogs going absolutely apeshit and coyotes in the middle of the night. I never go outside and pay too much attention to it, but you can't help but take note of it when it's just rattling outside your window. And Sarah and I heard not so long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, we heard the same thing, dogs going apeshit, and we heard strange, what we described as woman voices coming from way, way back. But anyways, what I'm getting at is, if any of the local people here, especially my friends in Mount Currie, if any of you know what's been going on currently, email it into me. And if any of you know what the gunshots are about, if that was possibly related, because I would absolutely not be surprised at all if some of those rifle cracks we're hearing at 1, 2 in the morning are definitely to detour someone or something that's digging around and behind the house, right? Anyways, I thought I'd mention that because I haven't, I keep forgetting to. But if anybody from Mount Currie wants to throw down, I don't care about names, I don't need to hear about anybody, but if you do know firsthand of why some rifle shots are cracking in the middle of the night, and they're not a lot, it's just one pow. It's always a single shot, rarely two, and it definitely jerks your eyeballs wide open in the middle of the night when you hear that rifle shot go up. And it's definitely a rifle, it's not a shotgun so far. Now, getting back on track. So many emails, man. I gotta figure out what to do with this to try to get on top of it. I mean, I don't know, how do we get on top of it? We get like another person or two people to continue reading, and then what do we do? We put up it. I mean, how do you even do you make the videos longer? And house more in one video? Plus, we would make them an hour and a half. I haven't a clue, you guys. Right now, this is about. I don't know if I know of any other people that are pumping out a video every single day on YouTube. It's not an easy thing to do, right? And the support through the PayPal is absolutely appreciated. It's getting cameras fixed, enabling me to offer up more time to continue doing this, which I'm not going to relay the amount of time I've got into doing these, but it's a little substantial. But anyway, we'll figure out how to do this more productive, but as well in a way that nobody misses anything. It's not an easy thing to do, right? From extremely skeptical to extremely curious and open-minded in less than 30 seconds. This ought to be good. Steve, I'm an author and local history enthusiast from Magna, Utah. I stumbled upon your YouTube channel several months ago. I've listened to your story and the emails you've shared with a steady seriousness. Like many folks who have sent you the stories, I had tucked unexplained experiences away, where I didn't have to think about them. But it took a separate, fairly recent experience to bring them forward and examine them with a very sober attitude. Many have to do with that visceral feeling of deep, unquestionable truth that our conscious mind often second guesses, whether it comes as a sudden, overwhelming fear of dread or the difficult to explain but real mind speak. The most recent event that took me from extremely skeptical to extremely curious and open-minded took place in Utah's West Desert on a clear, hot summer night. I was camping at the remote Simpson Springs with my longtime friend and editor, who is a member of the Samish Indian Nation and a published poet. The desert was too dry for a campfire, so we sat back in our chairs, looked up at the stars, and indulged in profound conversation, mostly religious. Sometime after midnight, things came into view in the upper sky that didn't behave like I thought satellites or airplanes should behave. We were both left speechless for a moment, and then my friend turned to me as if searching for words in the darkness and said, "Well, it seems we've had our manifestation for the night." I wanted to discuss it further, but all my friend could eventually say was simply, I don't know what it was. For me, this took me into a period of re-examination of things I had imagined myself too sophisticated to discuss with a straight face. And, as you've discussed numerous times on your YouTube channel, how horrible it is to to ridicule, dismiss, or explain away those rational and intelligent people who come forward with strange and unexplained but real experiences. Some of these experiences are traumatic and life-changing, and that's when we need to be open and understanding, true friends and family. Now for the older experiences that I had tucked away. I was 18 years old when I decided to take a girlfriend hiking up Butterfield Canyon in the Eau Claire Mountains on the west side of Salt Lake Valley in Utah. It was the late 1980s, and I parked my father's car in a U-turn off littered in a Ute. It was the late 1980s, and I parked my father's car in a turnoff littered with old campfire scars and broken beer balls. This canyon has a long history of mining and is active with hikers and hunters, so we both felt quite comfortable to take what seemed to be a well-worn trail along the creek coming down the canyon. The Eau Claire Mountains were once islands in a Pleistocene Great Lake called Lake Bonneville. Imagine a once isolated, mysterious stretch of islands with their own forests and animals 17,000 years ago. We followed the trail for quite a while, admiring the tall gamble oaks and maples. We reached a small, steep side canyon that led to pines. I wanted to get up to those pines to see the view of the canyon from there. I also had in mind what only an 18-year-old boy with his girlfriend would on a deserted mountainside with the whole day ahead. We were about halfway up when we both suddenly stopped, overwhelmed by a powerful feeling of dread and danger. What I remember most was how powerful the feeling was, as if I couldn't take another step forward. In addition to the inner feeling, this whole world around us seemed to have gone completely silent. I remembered it feeling as if it was pressing on my ears. The girl I was with was shaking and said she wanted to go home. At that time in life, I could be very stubborn and single-minded. I wanted to be tough and tell her we were fine. We're almost there, but that beautiful grove of old-growth pines had suddenly become dark and sinister. Instead, I positioned myself between her and the pines, and we turned and made our way back down to the creek. The feeling didn't go away until we exited the side canyon. The mood of the day was completely spoiled. The girl began to cry when we reached the car. Oh no, that sucks. On the way home, she said there was something evil up there and didn't want to go back. As a knee-jerk teenage thing, I wanted to snicker and say she was being dramatic, but I knew how I felt deep down inside. I never took her back there, but 30 years later, as an adult, I did go back, and this time with serious questions in my mind. The next time I went back, I had a friend with me who was as curious as I was, and it was he who was taking me there. What's important about this part of the story is I hadn't yet told him about my experience up there as a teenager. In fact, like I said above, I had buried the experience and moved on, partly because the memory involved an ex-girlfriend who had long since put out of my mind for, well, ex-girlfriend reasons. He was dragging me along up the mountain with a "you gotta see this" story. The mountainside leveled and somewhat and sloped differently in that area, right at the transition to pine. I hadn't yet recognized the place because we came to it from a different direction, not the small side canyon. He pointed out a group of very large trees that had been uprooted and stacked like a half teepee against another large pine. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? The trees were very old, mostly debarked by the time and covered with lichen and light moss. The root bases were rotted, some buried also by time. I tried to imagine a scout troop or group of parties taking the time to create this strange work of art. The closer I got to it, the more I realized not even 5 big guys could move a couple of those tree trunks. The large pines, still alive, had grown branches around the trunks. It could have been there 100 years. It became obvious to me that those trees hadn't fallen into that position. We hiked further, and he pointed out live oaks that were bent tunnel-like, almost a natural entrance to the side of the canyon sloping downward. But after a while, I couldn't come up with an explanation on how these oaks were bent and arced and shoved into the ground so perfectly that they grew that way, seemingly on an intentional manipulation of live growth. It was then I realized I was looking down the canyon where I'd taken my girlfriend hiking 30 years before. The second experience took place unexpectedly during a time of decision-making when I had to decide to go back to college as an adult in my early 30s. I was hoping to change careers at the time. I was at work alone. I'd been working nights by then for at least a decade. Oh, that must have sucked. I was contemplating what would have turned out to be a very bad decision at the time. I had left my office and was walking through an isolated area when I clearly heard my father ask me, Does it make you happy? The words came with several levels of understanding. He used to ask me the question every time I was in trouble for something stupid. I felt the words so deeply that I stopped in my tracks. They had come, not as words spoken audibly in the room I was in, but in my mind loud and clear. You see, my father had been dead for nearly 4 years by then. I have no doubts there is something more going on around us of what we can easily or readily see. There's a bigger picture, a bigger universe. To quote my Samish friend, the spiritual world is wild and woolly. We should be careful with where our curiosities take us, but that doesn't mean answers to the bigger picture aren't available to us if we want them. Good things take work, searching and seeking. They also take faith and open-mindedness, and above all, humble and teachable soul toward a higher power. God bless and keep searching. Robert Noble. Robert Goebel. Sorry, Robert. Wow. Well, I can remember what I felt like when I was 18. I'm telling you what, that's a shitty deal that screwed up that night with your girlfriend. That's a very helpful email you just shared with everybody here, I'll tell you what. Open-minded and accepting. It's funny how it's been smashed into the majority of the communities to not be like that, isn't it? Isn't it weird? Being alive just doesn't. This whole experience is mind-boggling. You know, if you pop your head up out of the hole in the ground and look around, smell the fresh air, and take a look what's really going on, and then compare it to what the majority of the herd's doing and being taught and teaching, it's just a big confusing shit show. You know, it's a great big confusing ball of shit going on. I'll tell you what. I think I'm feeling I'm feeling better than before we started doing this. I'm still confused. I try not to get as pissed off as I've been in the past with the mainstream bullshit, politicians, people in charge, misleading TV shows, in things created to keep human beings' attentions, to intentionally waste your time and keep you suppressed and not filling up with real knowledge. All those things really tested my patience over the years. But now I find myself, I've realized that I am surrounded with a massive group of very intelligent, kind people through this channel. And let's face it, you guys, both my channels, I've said it before, both combined around 7 million views a month. This channel alone, I think it averages 98.5% approval rate from those views. The majority of the people here, 99.9% of the people here, are very intelligent, very kind and helpful, and very knowledgeable. What a fortunate thing to be a part of, don't you think? And it's about every single one of us, right? Where are you going to duplicate that? Where else is there a place like that where it's about all of us, right? And everybody gets to speak and everybody gets to be listened to. It's a pretty good thing. Well, if there's any horny bears snuck up behind me, I haven't seen them unless you guys have. I guess I'll see them across the road behind me during the editing part of this. Won't be a first either. Remember, I think it was last year, some bears came out behind me. I've had deer come out behind me. And I've even had some strange other things come into the lens a couple times, right? Okay, what do we got? Sasquatch encounter. Another one. Spring or early summer 1971. My girlfriend and I had rented a canoe and was just paddling around at Jonathan Dickinson State Park in Jupiter, Florida. We were paddling past a small lagoon when I hear a sound like something hitting the water. I turned around to see what it was, and what I saw was water churning in a downward motion. I looked up toward the shoreline and I saw a man-like creature flinging his arm all around and stomping his feet like he was really mad or really frustrated. More than likely a combination of both. I had thrown a big rock. I did not see the rock. It had thrown a big rock. I did not see the rock, but I would guess it to be in the 30, 50-pound range. That would have been something else to see that rock fly out of his arms, would it not? The shoreline was maybe 50 to 60 feet away. The creature was covered in hair except for his face. The hair was not as thick as, say, a bear or gorilla. It was more sparse. I could see the outline of his legs. I did not I did not look very long. My girlfriend was screaming, and I got back onto the paddle, started paddling as deep and fast as I could. My girlfriend was paddling too. As I got further away, I looked back, and the creature was walking along the shoreline away from us, walking straight up. Its back was straight as an arrow. Its arms were quite a bit longer than a human's, and its hands were bigger than a man's hands. I noticed some park rangers, and I headed for them as fast as I could. When I arrived, I asked one of the rangers if there had been any reports of skunk apes that he knew of. He replied no. I started to tell him of what had just taken place when he stopped me, and in a sarcastic way, he asked me if it had any clothes on. I said no, but the hair on its upper thigh and legs was 5 to 6 inches long. I indicated the location and the length of the hair with my hands. He then asked me how tall it was. I said 6 to 7 feet. He was reluctant, to say the least. I told the park ranger that I thought I was probably trying to get at my girlfriend. That's when she started speaking up, and she saw a lot more than I had. She said it picked up this big rock and climbed up onto a tree limb, walked on the limb, and threw the rock at me. I was at the front, and she was at the back. The canoe was probably 12 to 15 foot long. She said I held onto the tree limb using its feet. Then the ranger started taking us more seriously. One of the rangers took a rifle, and I got in a John boat with an engine on it, and we went to investigate. I don't know if something turned up or not because I never went back. I wish I had, but I didn't. I never even told anyone because of an event that happened earlier in my life, and no one believed that. In fact, everyone laughed and joked at my expense for years. When my girlfriend spoke up, she told everybody, so much so that it got back to my mother, and one evening at the dinner table, she asked me what had happened at Jonathan Dickinson State Park. I told them, and the only thing that was said was, maybe you shouldn't go there. Not another word ever spoke of it. I completely forgot about it. No, I was married for 22 years and never mentioned it. I seen some of the stuff on your tube, and it came back clear as a bell. The question shouldn't be, are they real, because they are real. It's been validated over and over again. Rather, the question should be, why hasn't one ever been captured alive or dead? With all the dedicated hunters that we have in this country, no one has ever produced as much as the remains of a dead Sasquatch, skunk ape, or whatever you want to call it. If the government is covering it up, maybe they'll admit to it at some point. They're admitting that there is UFOs after decades of covering it up. All I know is what I saw was big, very strong, very aggressive. And I so believe they are attracted to the daughters of men. There you go. This is the first and only time I've told this absolutely true, and I will swear to it with my hand on a stack of Bibles. And I'm a God-fearing man, so I don't say that lightly. It happened when I was 20 years old, and I'm now 7 years old. That rock fell less than 2 feet from the canoe and less than 3 feet from me. If it had connected with the canoe, it would have ended up in the water or at the mercy of this creature. The lives of 2 young people might have been ended that afternoon. And we're just. That's the end of it. I hope there's no period. I hope nothing was missed. Ronald, huge respect to you for coming out and sharing that openly with the round table of knowledge here with all the people of the world here. What an experience. I guess, we can all bitch and complain about people not taking this topic seriously and not speaking openly about it in the past, but I'm pretty confident that time's passing us by now, don't you? I'm just trying to figure out how I can get people to openly speak to children and be honest with them, and because that is the way it's changing. You know what? Who clued me into that? I was guiding a doctor years ago, super nice guy, and he was a Syrian Christian, and war broke out there and all hell broke loose, and he told me some crazy stories of growing up in Syria. But I remember him telling me that it was just been after generations and generations of war, these children are being brought up with war. They're being brought up and taught to hate the enemy. Look at how many kids are brought up being taught to bash swords on their foreheads until they bleed, chanting death to America or death to whoever. And he was the first one, this was like 20 years ago, but I'll never forget what he said. And he said that change starts with children. It's the next generation. That's what changes the world, is the children. And I see that as totally true. And I know it's very awkward for a lot of you parents. It's awkward for a lot of you people to even think about speaking openly to your children about this. But I'll tell you what, if you're living in the correct places where the chance of this shit going down is high, you should probably speak openly with your children, your family, your relatives. All right? And if you feel too awkward to do that, maybe possibly pick out the right video from my channel anyway, or other ones, or other channels too, and email them to your friends or family members and let them watch for themselves, and throw them some good ones. I know what is a good one. Just throw them some of these emails and see some, so they can see people speaking matter-of-factly and sharing good, solid, open, honest knowledge. It's very, very important. All right? Thanks for sending that in, man. Appreciate it. If you got any more, you know anybody else that has something they could share that would help us, tell them to send it in. And if you know anybody that needs to hear this, share this video that you're listening to right now with them. All right?